curious if you've ever made a priorities list in your life, Have you ever sat down and wrote down, like, if I were to say my top 5, my top 8, my top whatever they might be priorities for my life, and I were to sort of think through the categories, what would that look like? This is one I just made, this isn't my real one, right? But have you ever, I have some things that I would say are priorities here. Relationship with Jesus is definitely at the top for me. I really like Lauren. I don't know if you know her, but she's pretty cool. So she's just under the Lord, If I would imagine if I would put her at number 4, what that would do to my afternoon. Yeah. So my children, I love my kiddos. I adore those little crazies, and it's so much fun. My family and friendships, obviously my vocation as a pastor, I could keep going. When you sit and you think about priorities, one of the things it does is it sort of wakes you up to the default that maybe is running your life in the background, and maybe sometimes the default isn't helpful. But it also invites you to really cherish and savor, why do I value what I say that I value? Why do I care about the things that I say I care about? And here's one of the things about priorities. They're not mutually exclusive. For instance, on my little list here, my relationship to Jesus informs my relationship to Lauren, to my kids, to my friends and family, to this church, right? They're interconnected in so many ways, and they all matter. If I was to just decide one day, I'm not going to care too much about the priority of being a father, just scratch it out one day, that'd be a problem. Because we all know, priorities matter. And when we come together and talk about priorities in our lives as a church community, as families, we have to understand that we all have multiple priorities, and what we do with those matters. I think priorities are complementary. At least I hope they are oftentimes. And we probably all know that just because something shows up on a list, it doesn't mean that we're actually doing anything with it. That's the other side of this, isn't it? Right? We might say that we prioritize our relationship to God and never pray, or we may say that we're really prioritizing, and we would say at the top, near the top of that list is my relationship to a significant other, or my relationship to some other loved ones in my life, or some friends, my connection to the local church. We might say that these are all priorities, but saying that they're priorities, thinking that they're priorities is much different than activating priorities. Because it's easy for us as we get into the rush of life. We all know this, right? We all know that in the midst of everything that we've got responsibility for, everything that's in front of us, from the moment we roll out of bed, if you're really sleepy when you roll out, anyone roll out of bed perky? Put your hand up, be honest. I know you exist. Yeah. Go home. No, just kidding. Oh man, thanks for letting me be ridiculous a little. Okay, anyway, we love that you're here. You add perk to our day. Okay, anyway, here's the thing, from the moment you get out of bed, you have things, right? You've got things to do. You've got things you've got to lean into, and when we have priorities that are hard to put into action, or maybe we've just not put into action for a while, what eventually happens is something bubbles up within us. For me, sometimes it's worry or anxiety. If I have a stated priority, but I'm not actually putting that into actionable life experience in some way, I can get anxious. Because I know something matters. I know something's important, but I can know things cognitively, but not actually do much with it. And some people would say that if you don't do much with it, is it really a priority, right? And this isn't about guilt. It's about the honest struggle that I think we all sort of walk through during various seasons of our lives. And different seasons actually mean that we're going to action priorities differently, right? Things sometimes take more time, things take less time, and we have to be honest and open and willing to do that. But I would say that deep inside of my own journey, if I'm struggling to actually put into action something I've decided in advance is a priority, leads to worry, leads to anxiety, leads to maybe I could do better. And I think one of the cool things about following Jesus is Jesus constantly invites us to reorient our priorities, to reimagine the way that we live our lives. And we don't have to be afraid to take action on things, and we don't have to kind of let things just linger. He wants to empower us to step into those things that matter each and every day. And one of the things we've been talking about around here is, like, what does it look like for the next generation to have a shot? Like, what does it look like for the next generation to be on our priority list as a church family, essentially? Because what we know, as we've talked about each week in the series, is that half of students that are part of the local church as teenagers will not end up part of the local church later. Half. And this is a huge deal if we're a parent, grandparent, uncle, aunt, cousin, friend of a friend. Like, it doesn't matter because we all have some connection to the next generation, and it matters. It matters that we as a church step in and say, you know what? There's prioritization that has to happen for young people. And when we talk about young people, of course, we're talking about children, we're talking about teenagers, and we're talking about young adults. And various stages in the journey have different sorts of resourcing that might be required as we prioritize. And why in the world do we prioritize anything at all? Well, when it comes to young people and when it comes to our lives as a church and as families, we have to ask the question, could we do something? If we were intentional, if they were on our list and we were going all in on this thing, what would it actually do against a statistic like this? So what we've done in the last several weeks is actually talked about research from a book called Growing Young. And we've talked about 6 core commitments that they highlight that come out of Scripture, but also the experience of when they surveyed churches that were thriving and flourishing with young people, not just involved, but seeing real transformation. And not just for the young people, and this is so important that we hear this, it's for the whole community, that when young folks are thriving, we are all thriving because it requires a village to raise the young. Do you get that? We're all in on it. And so we talked about key chain leadership, this idea that we could be the kind of people that hand opportunities to the younger folks in our community to be stretched, to grow. Maybe you're one of those younger folks that is in the midst of that right now. And we talked about the importance of empathy and stepping into the story of younger folks that maybe some of us don't quite understand, but it's not really about understanding. It's about listening and learning and coming alongside, journeying with. We then said characteristics of churches and family communities that really seem to be thriving with their young people involve just taking Jesus seriously, actually saying Jesus doesn't provide fluff. Jesus invites us into transformation, and it's hard, and it's not just simply A plus B equals C. It's follow me and see what happens, right? And so it's really a radical commitment to follow Jesus. And last week, we talked about warmth and this idea that together we create spaces of relationship where love is just exuding out of us, and that has such a powerful impact. And so as we look today to the fifth sort of commitment in this journey, I want us to have this idea that, you know what, as we prioritize, it matters that we put things into action. It matters. And so we can worry about young people, or we can prioritize their transformation. We can worry about young people, or we can actually prioritize their transformation. And a couple of important things here. It's not to the neglect of anyone else's transformation. It's simply saying that we are in a cultural reality where young people are leaving Christian community or not drawn to Christian community, and it doesn't have to be that way. There's some intention that we can step into. And so I want us to really step into Scripture with just a posture that says, you know what? Jesus, we're giving this to you because this is hard. We're giving the fact that our world is chaotic and messy. It's full of war, violence. It's full of challenges that are unprecedented. It's just full of stuff that doesn't seem easy to navigate. And we're going to say, you know, it's okay that we're concerned about these things. But Jesus also invites us to say, you know, take those worry and do something with it. Take those worries and do something with it. We can worry about young people. We can worry about life. We can worry about things in this world. Or we can prioritize not only the transformation of younger folks, but the transformation of all of us. So Jesus says this in Matthew chapter 6. It's a powerful and familiar passage of Scripture that I want to walk us through for the next few moments. He says, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And why do you worry about clothes?" All right, some of you are like, dude, I just like to look good, so let me worry a little bit about my clothes. Okay, fair, whatever. But Jesus is like, why? Like, why do you worry about all these things? Like, why? And this speaks to me, by the way. Like, this worry is something I have to navigate, you know? This is not like I've figured out worry. Like, worry is, I worry about my kids, and I worry about the health of this church. I worry about, a lot of things. And yet, Jesus invites me to yield that, to open up my hands, to open up my heart, to open up space where I remember that God is a good provider. God is a good shepherd. God sees me, and I don't have to control the world to thrive in the world. I don't have to fix the world with my worries. I can actually lay worries down at the cross and say, I don't know how to do this, but somehow, some way, you figured it out because the birds tell me every day. Unless they're magpies. I actually kind of like them, but anyway. Jesus keeps going. He says, "See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these." So the great King Solomon, who acquired lots of wealth, lots of wives, and lots of military, and it eventually led to the kingdom kind of collapsing, but that's a different story. He was dressed really well, and Jesus is like, even Solomon, who had all the stuff, doesn't even compare, doesn't even come close. Verse 30, "If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans, the non-Jewish people, the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. So as we have talked about family life in this series, and we've talked about the reality that young folks often leave the church after they leave home, what we're not doing is just simply causing worry to drive anything that we do. But it is appropriate to have a healthy concern about this, an actionable concern about this. And I again want to remind us about this idea that, we can worry. Like it's something we could do. Or we could prioritize making a difference. We could prioritize actual transformation. So here's one idea I just want us to sit with for a few minutes. Part of the remedy to worry is align our priorities with Jesus and to trust God to take care for us. Wow, that's grammatically impossible, this whole little sentence. I apologize. I typed that funny. Part of the remedy to worry is to align our priorities with Jesus and to trust God to care for us. I think I got it right that time. Where do you, in your own life right now, need that care in a special way? Like, where do you in your own journey just know, if I'm really honest, I am concerned about this, and my concern hasn't gotten me anywhere. My worry hasn't led to anything helpful. Because I think we all have those things that come up. And we can ruminate on worry, and we can keep going in our minds and talk to ourselves internally about how it's messed up and I don't know what to do. And that's natural and normal, and that's how our brains are wired in some ways. Like we are going to worry, but if you can name the worry, and if it's been lingering for a while, Jesus says, okay, so talk to me about it. Invite Jesus into it and simply invite God to be the person who actually cares. And then maybe from there you start to ask, okay, so how has this worry held me back from being someone who can care for others as well? Because one of the things that I've come to learn, and I'm still growing in, to be honest, is the more I give worry to Jesus, the more I invite him to care for me, the more I am freed up to love well, to lead well, to be available to people. That I don't go into every meeting or conversation with so much internal anxiety that I'm not going to tell the person in front of me, because why would I do that, right? But I'm so wound up inside that I'm barely even present. You know what I mean? And Jesus says it doesn't have to be that way. There's a God who cares. There's a God who invites you in. So part of the remedy to worry is simply saying, I'm going to prioritize the things Jesus prioritizes, and then I'm going to trust God to help me walk that through in actionable ways. And we've talked about one of the things that Jesus really does prioritize throughout the series, and that is young people. And I want to bring back a couple of passages we've looked at. Because, the invitation of the previous passage about worry is, so the remedy is also just seek the kingdom, seek the way of Jesus, seek God. And so Jesus has this theme, and it comes up again in these two passages. So Luke 18, we'll look at 16 and 17. You'll remember this one, I think from last week. Then Jesus called them to him and said, allow the children to come to me. Don't forbid them, because God's kingdom belongs to people like these children. I assure you that whoever doesn't welcome God's kingdom like a child will never enter it. And so Jesus really calls us here to take our stuff, take our concern, take our worry, of course, give it to God, and then to do the next thing and to say, okay, I'm going to seek Jesus' way. I'm going to seek Jesus' kingdom. And so as I'm seeking Jesus' kingdom priorities, and I'm still holding the stuff that's really hard and it holds me back and it's challenging and I don't know what to do with it, I don't have to just stay stuck in my own concerns, because I also want to have the concern of Jesus. And when I have shared priorities with Jesus, it puts into perspective the worry that I'm holding no matter where I go, no matter what I'm doing. And so Jesus says one of those things is prioritize children, prioritize young people. Let children and young people know that they're wanted, that they matter, that they're actually models of what it means to live in the kingdom. I mean, why are children such good models of the kingdom? Because they may have worry, but I'll tell you what, they worry and then they let it go and they go play. They worry, it's one of those beautiful things that I continue to learn from my younger ones. Jesus in another passage mentions the same theme. I'm going to bring this one back. We talked about it in week 1. And he says this, he says in Matthew 18, whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. As for whoever causes these little ones who believe in me to trip and fall and to sin, it would be better, this is that really cryptic warning, it would be better for them to have a huge stone hung around their necks and to be drowned in the bottom of the lake. Jesus doesn't recommend this as a method of dealing with people, but he's very clear that they matter so much that if you're involved in tripping up someone who's young, someone who's developing, someone who's learning, someone who's in the early stages of their own growth, be warned, that's a big deal. Be warned, it's a huge deal. If you're doing this privately in really terrible ways and you're in this room, you need to know, you need to talk to someone today. But it's not just those really terrible things that we don't ever want to talk about. It's also the things that get in the way. Like my pride can get in the way because I want to do certain things and I want them to be a certain way, and having to flex around the development of this child, like that actually invites me to have to do something, and it's sacrificial at times, especially like this last week when one of them was throwing up at 1 a.m. and I had to not sleep. This causes us to have to step in when we don't always want to step in, to flex when we don't want to flex. And Jesus says, look, if you're the cause of a young one being tripped up, you need to figure out what you're doing, because it's a big deal. You need to reorient your priorities and activate them in ways that no longer get in the way of what God could do in this person or this group of people's lives. And so a second kind of connected point here as we think about worry and the care of God is that Jesus calls us to prioritize young people as a core part of contributing to our shared kingdom work. This church has a history of that. This church from the early days, we celebrated 60 years last year, and I'm pretty new, and I was learning about the history, going back in old photos, and there were kids clubs happening here, and before this room existed, the founders of this place actually said, we're going to build a space that could be multi-purpose because we want to make an impact on our community. And so they built a multi-purpose gymnasium over there. And at the time, of course, we didn't have this covered foyer, and it was so much different around here. You look around, I imagine it's a lot different when it comes to the dynamics of the neighborhood at that time, but they saw around them, and some of you folks are still part of this community, and you saw around you the possibility that this place at this location could make an impact on the families and the young people and beyond it. And so this is not something that Brentview has deprioritized historically. This is actually a part of the DNA of this place in so many ways, that young people were going to be on the priority list from day one. And we have these photos of like 100 kids in a kids camp, and they're just loved and clearly happy because they're smiling in the picture. So we assume they're happy, right? I'm sure they are happy because people came alongside and said, we see the potential in your life. How many of you, how many of us can look back at those developmental years of our lives and say there was someone or a group of people who came alongside and said, you matter? For me, it was my youth pastor, it was my uncle, it was my various people in my family. It was my local church, and they came alongside and said, look, Curtis, I was Curtis in those days, right? You can call me Curtis if you want, but you'd be in the company of like 3 people. My wife, my mom, my grandma, my wife mostly when she's mad. So, you can join in that if it helps you feel good things. Anyway, but they came alongside and said, we see Curtis and we see his potential and we see the image of God in him. And because they did, they called something out of me that I wouldn't have figured out by myself. And I have a feeling that many of you, especially if Christianity is something you've adopted when you were younger, have those people in your life and would say, yeah, they were people who prioritized my development. They stepped in. They invested. They had emotional equity, sweat equity, financial equity in the equation that made my transformation possible. It's such a beautiful thing to know that not only are many of us beneficiaries of that journey, but we're also now called to do the exact same sort of thing. I want to talk about why this matters, why prioritizing young folks matters so much, adding them to your calendar, being warm and kind, whatever it looks like for each of us. I want to show you the research. They came up with this wheel. Some of you would have seen this at our volunteer training day. Now, as folks at the Fuller Youth Institute sort of organized all of their research findings from these 250 churches they surveyed and explored, you can see keychain leadership, empathy, Jesus' message, warm relationships. You can see all of those things here. Next week, we'll talk about being awesome neighbors, right? Being the best neighbors. And that's the For Calgary and For the World stuff we talk about around here. And what they found is this, that you could do all of the things on this wheel. And by the way, a wheel by nature is cyclical. It's moving. It's ongoing. You could do all of the things as a church. You could be awesome neighbors, keychain leaders, empathy, focus on Jesus' radical message, be a warm and welcoming space, but without actually intentionally deciding that young people are to be prioritized, especially when it comes to their transformation and integration into the community. They're great churches, but they're great churches for a narrow demographic. That people will start churches and then they'll be a decade older, and a decade older, and a decade older. You could do 5 out of the 6 and keep doing the 5 out of the 6, but eventually it ages out. And so the research actually calls this idea of prioritizing young people as part of the ethos of the community. They actually say this is the hinge point to handing the baton of faith on so that a legacy is built and the transformation process continues and continues generation upon generation upon generation. The book says it this way. I'll give you a couple of quotes here. Churches growing young, prioritize young people, not just for the sake of making young people happy. That's important. We aren't here to make young people feel, woohoo, everyone's so nice to me and I don't have to try. No. We're here to invite them into the way of Jesus, which is hard, as we've talked about. So it's not merely to make young people happy but because the whole church benefits. One pastor over 40 years put it like this: everybody rises when you focus on children and teens. Adults in another church reflected, young people are like salt. When they're included, they make everything taste better. I sure hope so. In an article reflecting on this particular point on their blog, this is what they add to this conversation. They say this: let us be clear. We're not saying younger people matter more than older people. We're also not saying that it's a good thing for congregations to become exclusively young. Young people need the church, and the church needs young people. We believe it's possible for every age group in the church to matter equally while still placing greater priority on young people. We need to hear that. This isn't about becoming a youth church or something. This is about becoming a family church, being a family church that says developmental years matter in a very unique way. That young folks, they truly need scaffolding to help them, when you're building something, and I'm not really good at building anything, so this is a terrible metaphor for me to give you, but some of you get it, right? So you're building a building, and you want to really do a great job, but you can't reach beyond, 7 feet or whatever, so you have scaffolding that sort of elevates the possibility that you can keep reaching higher and higher as you try and build the thing, right? And so prioritization is kind of like that. It's like saying we want to have spiritual scaffolding that is available so that as young people are going through the journey of transformation, they're not sitting there like, we don't know what to do. We can't quite reach. I've got a very good vertical, I know. You're all impressed with that. It's about saying, you know what? There are some structures and some ways that we can come alongside the developmental process so that we can help the young person who starts in our ministry stay in the local church for a long, long time. So, here's some big ideas as we kind of wrap up today. For parents or home life in general, here's a few thoughts. If you're a parent, especially, I want to say this to you. Do the work you've got to do to prioritize your relationship to God, your spouse, and your kids. Do the hard work. I know too many families over the years where they just decided not to try. They let default win. They let worry and anxiety run their lives to the point where lip service to, I care about my kids. Yeah, I care about my spouse. Yeah, of course, I care about my relationship. And the fruit of their lives were nothing like the priority. And it leads to so much pain and so much brokenness. So if you're in that space of your life and you happen to be a parent, but even beyond that, like anyone in this room, there's work to be done, and God wants to partner with you in that work and find a community that is willing to partner with you in that work. You've got to prioritize formation in your own life for the sake of others. The second thought here is prioritizing means that you parent, if you're a parent, you parent with the relationship to your kids in mind, not mere compliance. Do you want to have a relationship with your kids when they're 20? Have a relationship with your kids when they're 10. Do you want to be the kind of parent who, in the future you could say, wow, like we had a holiday and my kids actually wanted to hang out together and they wanted to hang out with me? Compliance is not the goal, although it's going to be necessary, right? The goal is deep, meaningful, Jesus-centered relationship that lasts a lifetime because it extends beyond your house. And then finally, it takes a village to raise young followers of Jesus. You're not alone. Don't go at this alone. And then for the local church, invest time and finances. We have a slogan around here about generosity. We contribute to our shared kingdom work. Contribution is a huge deal. So many of you serve in ways that are making a huge impact. The coffee team makes a huge impact on the formation of a space for young people to feel welcome. Running a one group, being part of any kind of space here is all part of helping contribute to a kingdom family that says, you know what? We are going to be the kind of place where all of us thrive together and young people are safe to develop and grow as followers of Christ. Invite young people to increasingly take on load-bearing roles, that there are opportunities at developmentally appropriate stages. It's the keychain leadership thing, right? To actually have some skin in the game. If you're a young adult and you're not giving to the local church, I want to invite you to give to the local church. If you're a young adult and you're not serving yet, we want to help you serve. We believe that your involvement matters. And then everyone, each generation rises when we prioritize the young. So, I want to imagine with you for a moment, 10 years from now. 10 years from now, as a church, we have said yes. We are going to make room for everyone, and we are going to prioritize the development of young people, not to the neglect of everyone else. Everyone else is needing their own sort of formational process. We're into that. But to say, we're going to take all of the resources, all the acquired wisdom of the room, all of the stuff that we have gained in our experiences of following Jesus, and we're going to say that no generation should have half of it walk away from this place like it doesn't matter anymore. Imagine that place here at Brentview where relationships are warm, where the young are finding Jesus, where young adults are finding identity, purpose, and belonging in meaningful ways here in this space. And where all of us together are a witness to the kind of life, the kind of world that Jesus wants. So can we take worry and put it before Jesus? And can we put action to the things that Jesus calls us to prioritize? Life as a Christian community, life with the young, life together. Because if we do that, I think we're going to see miraculous things happen, not just 10 years from now, but today. Let me pray for all of us. Jesus, thank you for your goodness. Thank you for the fact that your grace is big. That when we struggle with worry, when we get anxious about priorities that are hard to put into action, that together you've given us the possibility of really taking action on the things that you care about, to seek first your kingdom. Thank you that in the eyes of young people, we see what it looks like to welcome you and to welcome your kingdom in ways that truly make a difference. Help us to step into those spaces you call us to. Seek first you. And to release the things that hold us back. Lord, you are good. So for the next few moments, Jesus, we would just want to spend time worshiping you through songs, prayer. Empower us to love like you love. In your name I pray. Amen.